Hi, everybody. This is a most interesting evening because we have three questions that are kind of dovetailing in the same way. Even if they're not, I'm going to make them dovetail because um, they have to do with engaging with a different level of or a different state of consciousness than what we normally are used to. There's a consistent spoken question often other than what should we expect when we're engaging with other states or spiritual growth, or should spiritual growth be identifiable as it is from these levels that we actually usually live on. And we've set up a whole bunch of different ways of making sense of things. Usually, they're primarily involved with the idea of maintaining some kind of view that can be modified by us individually, personally, so that we can identify and make sure we know what spiritual growth is. We have a whole bunch of rules about these things. The difficulty with those rules is that whenever you're engaging with actual spiritual development, there is a state that shifts in us. And we're trying to make sense of an internal relationship that we have with what we see that is really rudimentarily engaged with being, literally being in control or a hope of some control about what everything means. Meaning becomes extremely important. And because it's important, we move to other people's views about what things are. I think one of the important things that we can actually come up with is allowing ourselves to understand that everything we engage with often is related to metaphor, almost everything. And then from there on in, attempt to move past or beyond what we would normally come up with as an answer to what we perceive. In other words, to the metaphor. The ancient sages used to call this a dream, and they were being very kind at the time. Some ancient sages weren't that kind. They would call it the land of the living dead. They would call it, and meaning, of course, we weren't really able to perceive higher states of consciousness. We were perceiving states that we believed were higher states of consciousness, but still locked into a relationship with how the personality made sense of things. And that really basically is how we tend to find our zones, whether they be comfort zones or zones where we can allow ourselves to be okay with ourselves. Because there is one consistency that is tied together very strongly, and that is we have been taught how to judge. We have been taught how to negate. We have not been taught how to understand our relationship with life here. There's an attempt that is constantly being made by psychology, sociology, philosophy, and many thinkers have tried to come up with many answers, and legitimately they are thinking through the mechanism that is constructed here on these planes. It's very legitimate, but still related to these planes. Some have linked up with higher states and are at the same time trying to express it in the words that relate to these planes so that people who live on these planes can understand what they're talking about. This is very difficult. However, when you're actually involved with growing through you, there is a consistency also. You tend to support what you already have figured out. And it's a figuring process that we have here. It's the only way we can do it. We can also jump to conclusions. We can also read other people's stuff. And we can come up with kind of plagiarizing our life. In other words, looking at other people's conclusions and relating them directly to us, because it makes us feel at least as if we're making sense to ourselves. This is not a negative thing. It's just something that may be helpful until it isn't. It's other people's experience that we're relating to, not our own, and we're growing through us. So, in that same way, when we do have experiences, we tend to move back into the place that relates to how we normally figure. And we figure through our own experience and our own mental facility, usually emotional disposition, intellectually oriented. Nothing negative there either. The dilemma is we're attempting to perceive metaphorically, meaning we're searching for meaning. We're searching for an understanding that would be okay momentarily and that we can be valued internally by us so that we can allow ourselves to function in a way that in this second is good for us, but we're still influenced by how we should be, and we shouldn't, there's no idealistic should be, but doesn't matter. We're still influenced by this engagement. As honest as we can get it, we try to figure out what should spirituality be and how should it be, and we don't really understand it. One very interesting engagement is with a lady called Blavatsky in Theosophy. A very interesting one because she had no trouble engaging internally as if she was watching some other level, other state, and talking about what she perceived. She was a very bright lady, spoke many languages, very capable, but she was still interpreting what she perceived. And so she attempted to be helpful to all of those in the Theosophical Society by an interpretation of what her growing process was like. She ruled the day when people would not allow themselves to do the same thing as her, but only take her words as gospel, because that was her growing through her and wondrously doing so. In a small book called something about what is theosophy, she wrote it in the last 40, 50 pages somewhere. She was really nervous about the fact that that's what people would do. Well, when people do this, this is not a negative thing to do. This is the only alternative that we believe we have at our disposal. So we talk like our experience is like somebody else's, yet it's not ours. Because we use the words that make us feel comforted. This is really an important word, by how we can comfort ourselves. And we're legitimately attempting to comfort ourselves through a growing process. And this is another important word, of course. Also, there are others who have done the same thing. Many who have written in India. Buddhists have written about these things. Buddha attempted to write in a way that he thought might be helpful to others. Wallace Bailey, and in the Theosophical Rendering in the U.S., attempted to do the same thing. Any experience you have, you will attempt to make sense of. It's very difficult for us as human beings to metaphorically make sense of something and then engage with the ideals that we have, engage with allowing ourselves to watch us do those things, the things that are emotional, the things that might be physical, the things that might be what we consider mental. And then also, on top of that, meditate. Now, meditation is interesting because the purpose of meditating is thinning the engagements that you have with these planes and the thoughts you have about it, the rules you've made of it, and the recognition of the fact that enables the recognition of the fact that you moment to moment are still growing. And those thinnings that go on in your personality construct are there so that you can see through them and also look at the personality and how you engage. It's not there for you to judge it, but you've been trained to judge. Not look at things metaphorically. Not look at things and say, wow, I wonder if I can influence myself to do a little bit of shift or change in my defensive structure, which will support remaining the same as I was before. Because the personality you have is not negative. It's constructed. And it's constructed for the purpose of engaging with life, whatever that is. And none of us are perfect. We don't have a perfect method of engaging. We have a personal method of engaging. And fortunately for us at the same time, there are similarities, but not identical ways of engaging. These similarities are based on energy and the types of frequencies that we can allow ourselves to handle as we engage with life on these planes. These planes are focused on the body. What you see is not me. What I see in another is not them. It's an aspect of them. They are energy forms, not some you see only on these planes, but a deeper level of engagement. They are energy forms moving from one state to another, to another, to another, and beginning to focus on these planes so that they can begin to move back again through another state, and another, indicating not how you believe those states should be, but being in those states and beginning like a child, like a little kid, to learn about something that you believe you know something about and finding out you don't know very much about it at all. I'm sure you remember Art Linkletter. I don't know, 50s, 60s, if you're old enough to do that. And maybe you're not old enough to do that. Then you're at a disastrous shortfall, difficulty. I'll take that back. Maybe you're lucky not to remember Art Linkletter, but he used to interview 4 and 5-year-olds and ask them about the universe. Unfortunately, also ask them about their parental background. And they always came up with an answer. The answer was so comical sometimes to an adult. But think about this for a minute as a metaphor. I'll give the full minute. None of us like the answer to this one. But it's not an answer. It's an experiential movement. Movement is valuable. Taking a movement towards a generosity and a kindness and a compassion and a loving of yourself is, you would think, easy. It's not. And the reason why it's not is we are in love with another image that should be right. But it's the image is also a structure that was created by movement towards what we call a maturing or some kind of endpoint where you should be almost perfect if you're over 30. I apologize to anyone over 30 and under 30 because there's no perfection in this. It's a tool that we could use to engage with others in life, and we rigidly cement it in places that comfort us while engaging with others that we can't really understand, or we understand, or we're in awe of, or whatever it happens to be. And at the same time, we're growing through us into a place that might allow us to be okay with seeing that we're okay to move instead of allowing ourselves to remain the same and protecting us to the nth degree so that we cannot understand something that is basically there to be helpful to you in the understanding of everyone, including yourself. We don't walk into this world compassionate. We walk into this world coming out of a womb where we've been listening to at least two people engage with a frequency that relates to backgrounds of loving emphasis. We immediately engage with how that sensing system pinpoints love for us. Those tones are what love is, because you are a loving being, a dependent being. You're in fluid, symbiotic fluid, and here you are, and you're dependent upon this wondrous engagement with chemistry and tones, sound, and it's linking you emotionally, physically, mentally, kind of, and literally soul to soul with this tone that you feel so honored, and it is so loving bringing you into these planes. You come out, got to start all over again. Those same tones also have now physical reactions involved with them. And now you're beginning to figure out these things are what should be. And we make choices of partners this way. We make choices of how we live life this way. And we comfort ourselves with those same tones, whatever they may be. Okay, you've heard this all before. I'm inclined to agree. You can only hear it 4,273 million times before you're comfortable with it. It's not. Why should it be relevant to us? Because it is. Now, this meditation thing and this attempting to be generous and kind and respectful of the form that you have, but not necessarily do you have to agree with it. So slowly, you can notice that you do something and then slowly pull away a little bit, knowing full well that you will tend to repeat these things, but you can find a balance in. Sometimes it might be even helpful to do that. Other times, not so much, but now you have to rephrase and re-engage with the child engagement that you had before, and it served you perfectly, into another form where you are noticing that you have a mind, a higher emotional disposition, even a higher physical sensitivity to you doing something that may not be as wonderful from your perspective, unconscious perspective. I agree, sometimes conscious, so that you can continue your reshaping of a form, a tool that is used here on these planes to engage with other planes. Other planes don't judge it. So therefore, you don't have to continue to judge you for how you are as a tool. My God, it's been helpful to you. Why would you judge it? Seeing this as a metaphor for continual growth is extremely hard for us because we have that edge. It should be like this, it should be like that, it should be like this, and it is like that, and the reason why I do that is this, and the reason why I don't do that is this, and why should I do this? And absolutely perfectly valid with the tools that we have. Except you don't have to agree with it. Jeannie Brown says there's no sound. Is your mic on? No sound is coming through. I apologize if there's no sound, and reading lips is not a natural thing for most of us. Marlene is going to check this. Hopefully we've been okay, but it looks like for some it is not okay. It's so too bad. There is sound now, Jeannie says. Thank you, Jeannie Brown. So, yes.
It is fine.
Okay. Thank you, Jeannie. So, and Marlene. So, what we're looking at here is meditation as an engagement with another in-between place within us. Now, what does that mean? It means when you attempt to gain access to a different state than the one that is normal in you when you're engaging with life, often called the beta state, meaning very mechanically engaged with the physical, emotional, and mental systems, and can be checked in your brain. You are attempting with meditation to move at least into an alpha state. Okay, so far? Alpha meaning kind of a little bit, it's not sleep because that's deeper alpha and beyond, but it's kind of a buzzy state. That is the most ridiculous way of speaking that I've ever heard. But anyway, nonetheless, it's as if you're slowly beginning to engage while awake with a state that helps you to help you, not judge you. Okay, that's a theory. No, it's not only a theory, it's an actual fact. That's why many people don't move to meditate. They are very nervous that they begin to see in this, through the spaces that occur in us, and there are many. Our minds are quite capable of seeing much more than we allow them to see. And when we see them, though, there's an automatic reflex of response in the beta level, the mechanical levels, to engage with and judge and assess on our tabulation of what spiritual is, that this is not spiritual. This is not real. An engagement with recognizing and understanding where you are and being okay with learning and growing is very real in the process of broadening out your ability to handle broader states of consciousness. Unfortunately, we still bring to the table what we believe has to be there. And we judge that because we're looking for some idealistic manner of engaging with life that shows others, as well as ourselves, that we're somehow spiritual. This does not exist. I'll give that one a minute. No offense. I think we all need a minute. It doesn't exist because you can't let it exist. To be empty causes you to be able to perceive everything without influence of the emotional disposition, reflexes in already there in the physical body, and the natural, wonderful protection of the mental structure of the emotional states that are already valued by you and constructed by you habitually. That's why it's so difficult to remember something that you have learned might be there in a moment that might be helpful to you in your daily life. So difficult because the amygdala just fires, the emotionless chemistry is moving through your body, and you can't bring yourself to remember anything because your focus is then right directly on a reactive state. This is normal for us in this world. Slowly, we begin to intercede with a consideration, something like this. So I said something like this. You engage with that yourself, if you can. The intercession is, whoa, just a minute. I don't think I even agree with this. But the body is still speaking. The emotions are still speaking. And a part of you, because of meditation and because of an allowance within you that attempts to regulate what you think is real or right, bad or good, by a reconsideration of a second or two. You can say something, even if you're talking to hundreds of people. And if you instantly feel that it's not quite right like that, you need courage to say, no, I don't think it's exactly like that. It's something like that. I think it's more like this. Can you not say that to yourself? This is very difficult to do, but it is an active movement that allows you to be okay with you because you are interceding for you becoming more consciously aware of a state where that is possible to do, except it's not perfect. You will not disagree with you. You will sometimes can't be astonished at the fact that what comes out of your mouth is so alien to what you believe might be valuable if you take a second look. Is it okay? Absolutely. Everyone does the same thing or very similar. Is it okay if you decide that you have the right to engage differently where everyone around you expects you to engage in a different way? You know that walking into family background after a period of time of not being there shows you that this idea is absolutely concrete. They expect you to be the same way as you were the last time they talked to you. They don't do that consciously. That's a reflex. They're preserving their way of seeing you so that they're comfortable with engaging with you. If you change that, they're less comfortable. They have to reassert an engagement with how do I figure that, why is she doing this way? You have the same thing that you're dealing with as you broaden your relationship with a level of consciousness that is an altered state level of consciousness. As you begin to have different levels of energy operate through your personality, the personality itself is doing the same thing as your family background would do if you visited them after not seeing them for about 5-6 years. That is not a negative thing. That is a natural thing. We don't very often have people trying to help us understand that. The emphasis normally in spiritual growth is based on having to be a certain way, talk a certain way, engage a certain way. And spiritual growth is most often focused on the inside of a being, and it affects the outside of the being, but it's inside growth, where your inside and outside are connecting in a way that's different than only how your personality trailings or engagements with life are continued on the basis that they have been before. There's movement, there's change. Yeah, definitely, but not necessarily in a certain specific way does it have to be that way. If you take a really good close look, more energy comes into you and helps you to notice your judgment and your frailty, your vulnerability, but also it helps you to recognize that it's okay to be those things, but also at the same time, it's helping you to move past the need to assess that way. It's helping you to make friends with your vulnerability. Your insistence on remaining in the same way is because you're comforted by never changing the way you think you need to be. You reassert these things over and over again. And you do that because the vulnerability sometimes makes you nervous about being something other than you were. First of all, you're going to lose your parental love. Absolute nonsense. Never happen. People will like you more, like you less. People will be nervous around you. Has happened. But at the same time, you'll be looking at that. They'll see you in a different way than they could before, because when you're around them, they will be shifted inside and they will be seeing differently. Oh, by the way, that's happened to you. In your spiritual development, experiences happen. You sometimes can notice things that you do as if they're in a whole different world. And we have a multiplicity of different worlds we've lived in. And that, I mean, different ways of engaging, past life. And this time, even now, we have a whole repertoire of how we engage with others. They're bits of dust that are not negative, but aspects of our personality. And these cycles that those dust levels are in, that's all they are. They're there to be used and sometimes not used. Sometimes there's huge pieces of dust because we depend on those pieces of dust in a cycle of engagement with life. If we don't keep them, somehow we think we're going to be less than. It is not true. Most times, we're more able because we're able to recognize them, allow them to occur as part of us, but not necessarily use them as often. Therefore, they diminish in reflexive reality in our life, but they don't disappear. The reason why they don't disappear is because we see others through them. And if you learn how to be compassionate with you, there's a shocking thing that happens. You begin to be compassionate for others. Profound thing when it happens. You say, oh my gosh, that's like me sometimes. My God, they can't do anything about not doing what they're doing because it's one of the major parts of them that they depend on for their own sense of being okay, comfort zone, whatever you want to call it. Then you begin to notice your relationship with that place within them. You can then use internal healing simply because if you reach the stage where you can watch the energy coming into you and through you, it will head for certain centers because those centers in you are where that tool is that helps you survive in the world, but also can be softer. You will never lose the capacity you have to do what you do. It just will not be as important to you. Meditation can broaden that willingness to see things metaphorically instead of figuratively. Instead of figuring out things. Figuratively is similar to metaphorically. So sorry about that. These times are very strange because more and more people are beginning to understand that they are a looking glass. They can look into a mirror or look through the form that is seen in the mirror and begin to understand others through it without negating themselves or others. But understanding the depth of relationship that each and every one of us has by engaging with light from a different perspective, we understand that we are more than tied together. We affect each other. And trying to help you is something that you can do for others. Not by doing anything much, just by engaging with you. And that flow of consciousness, of energy, adjusted in you, affects others who are unable at this second, this moment, to affect anything in themselves that relates to a similar way of engaging that you have. You don't even have to be. As a matter of fact, you're not using that particular method as much as you were before. Therefore, you are affecting them in a very constructive manner, meaning you're helping them to move inside themselves for the purpose of actually helping others ultimately, whether it be known or unknown to them. How we perceive things becomes important. Reconsideration relates to dialogue. And if you ever think you need to talk with others that might be helpful, consider talking with respect, kindness, and as much honesty as you can, gently to yourself. It is of great value. It doesn't solve all the problems in the world, but it does help you engage with other states of consciousness, which can help you because of the method of engagement it has with us already. Whatever you put your focus on, more energy will come in to instigate a stronger engagement with what your focus is on. You can use this in a very constructive manner. Don't be worried about making mistakes and acting out the way you did before. It's you working to help you, and you are of great value, whoever you are. And so many yous out there, so many really potentially helpful beings, because energy can operate through them and does the same as you. And you are helpful to others. I'm not sure what time it is. It's about 7:45. I think that's all I have to say about that. So, and these questions were from Betty Taslin, Donna McIntosh, and Natalie Taylor. These are questions that are focused on every individual's growing process, the vulnerabilities, the willingness to go beyond, and the protection of that which was before. Meditation does help, but the dialogue that you have with you and the help you give you is a process called spiritual development. You will get help wherever your focus lies. That's why many people lean on the words of others, because I can help them in their structure. That's why many people defend how they think things should be from these levels, because it makes them feel as if they are important and superior to others, by the way, sometimes. That's too bad, because all beings of consciousness, especially spiritual beings, are just human beings. They have the same frailties, and those frailties are subtle because they live in these planes. They are affected by these planes, and they engage with these planes. The difference is they are conscious of those engagements. They perceive them as they're in them. And the very act of them engaging and trying to help those things that are operating through them from others is an act of helping others who cannot help themselves sometimes. But it's involved, your internal growth is involved with you helping you so that you can help others. This is a broader view of spiritual development. And I think from my perspective, it's vital. That doesn't make giants of a people, it just makes giants, able beings who continually move in a direction beyond wherever they are in the moment that they look at themselves. All beings, not just those who are not spiritual, in quotes. All beings, everyone. I wish you all an extremely good evening, and we're just going to meditate. Take care.